The rope burns on her wrists told Samuel everything he needed to know about mercy in this God-forsaken territory. She hung against the barbed fence like a scarecrow, arms stretched wide, her swollen belly straining against a torn calico dress. Unconscious, breathing shallow. The morning sun painted her face ghost pale, but her dark hair whipped in the wind like a battle flag that refused to surrender. Pa? 10-year-old Jesse's voice cracked. He'd seen death before, his mother's slow fade 2 winters past. But this was different. This was cruelty with intention. Samuel dismounted, his boots crunching on the frost-brittle grass. The girl couldn't be more than 16, maybe 17. Her condition was obvious, the child inside her maybe 7 months along. Someone had tied her here to die. Slowly, the kind of death reserved for those who would cross lines that decent folk pretended didn't exist. "Turn around, son." "But Pa, turn around." Jesse obeyed, but Samuel caught him stealing glances as he cut the ropes. The girl collapsed into his arms like a broken doll, her breathing shallow but steady. Alive. Barely. Her lips moved, forming soundless words in what might have been Spanish or Apache, maybe both. The land stretched endless around them, their small ranch house a distant speck against the horizon. No other souls for 20 miles in any direction. Whoever had done this had chosen the spot carefully, remote enough that screams wouldn't carry, close enough to the main trail that someone would eventually find the body. Samuel had been riding fence line, checking for winter damage, a routine morning that had just become anything but routine. His horse, Dancer, snorted and pawed the ground, sensing the wrongness that clung to this place like smoke. The girl's eyelids fluttered. For a moment, her gaze locked with his, dark eyes filled with terror and something else, recognitionables. And, no, something deeper, a desperate kind of hope that cut straight through him. "Pa, is she gonna die?" Samuel looked at his son, then at the girl in his arms. 3 years since Mary's death had left them alone in this harsh country. 3 years of quiet suppers and longer silences. 3 years of Jesse growing up too fast in a world that showed no mercy to the weak or different. The smart thing would be to ride to town, let Sheriff Morrison handle it, let someone else deal with the consequences of getting involved. But as the girl's eyes closed again and her head fell against his chest, Samuel knew he'd already made his choice. The question wasn't whether he'd help her. The question was whether helping her would destroy them all. Samuel carried her inside like she was made of spun glass, Jesse trailing behind with questions tumbling over themselves. The girl stirred as he laid her on Mary's old bed, the room he hadn't entered in 2 years. "Agua," she whispered. "Por favor." Jesse fetched water while Samuel examined her wrists. The rope burns were deep, infected. Someone had kept her tied for days, maybe longer. Her dress was torn in places that told stories he didn't want to imagine. But her belly? The child inside moved visibly, pressing against the fabric like it was fighting for space to grow. "She's having a baby, ain't she, Pa?" "Yes, son, she is. Like Mama did, before." The memory hit Samuel like a fist. Mary, pale and bleeding, the stillborn daughter they'd never named, the fever that took her 3 days later, the promise he'd made to God in those final hours, a promise he'd broken by letting bitterness consume him. The girl's eyes opened, focused on Jesse with something close to wonder. She reached out with a trembling hand, touched his cheek with fingers soft as prayer. "Niño," she breathed. "Safe?" Jesse nodded solemnly. "You're safe now. Pa won't let nobody hurt you." Samuel felt the weight of that promise settle on his shoulders. The girl, hardly more than a child herself, was Mexican, maybe half Apache from her features. In this territory, that combination was tantamount to a death sentence, especially for an unmarried pregnant girl. "What's your name?" Samuel asked gently. "Elena," she whispered. "Elena Vasquez." Over the next 3 days, her story emerged in fragments. Her father, a Mexican rancher, had been killed in a land dispute. Her mother, Apache, had died in childbirth years before. Elena had been taken by her father's killers, white men who saw her as property to be used and discarded. When her condition became obvious, they'd decided to let the desert claim her. "They said," Elena's voice broke, "they said no one would miss a half-breed's bastard." Jesse's face flushed red. At 10, he didn't understand all the words, but he understood cruelty. "That's not true," he said fiercely. "We'd miss you." Samuel watched his son, this boy who'd grown quiet and distant since Mary's death, come alive again in Elena's presence. watched him bring her wildflowers and read to her from his school books, watched him place protective hands on her belly when the baby kicked. But the outside world had ways of intruding on Sanctuary. On the fourth morning, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. 3 riders, moving with purpose. Samuel recognized the lead horse, Sheriff Morrison's bay gelding. Behind him rode Deputy Carter and another man Samuel didn't know, but recognized by type. Eastern clothes, soft hands, the kind of entitled anger that came with money and grievance. "Stay inside," Samuel told Elena and Jesse. "No matter what you hear, stay inside." He stepped onto the porch, rifle loose in his hands, and waited for his world to change again. The riders reined up 20 feet from the house, their horses breathing hard from the morning ride. Sheriff Morrison tipped his hat, but his eyes held no warmth. "Sam, heard you found something that don't belong to you." "Depends on what you mean by belong, Sheriff." The Eastern man spurred his horse forward, middle-aged, soft around the edges, but his eyes held the kind of cold calculation that came with inherited cruelty. "My name is Harrison Blackwood. I own the Lazy Bee spread north of here. That girl you're harboring is stolen property." "Property?" Samuel's voice went flat. "She's a human being. She's a half-breed whore who ran off with something of mine." Blackwood's smile was all teeth and malice. "The child she's carrying belongs to me. My son got her pregnant before she murdered him and fled." The lie hung in the air like smoke. Samuel had seen Elena's injuries, heard her broken whispers about what had been done to her. This man's son hadn't gotten her pregnant. He'd raped her. And now, with the boy dead, Blackwood wanted to claim the child as his heir. "Even if that were true," Samuel said carefully, "she's free to choose her own path." "Not in my territory." Blackwood produced a paper from his coat. "I have a warrant, signed by Judge Hartwell. Elena Vasquez is wanted for murder and theft. The child she carries is evidence of her crimes." Deputy Carter looked uncomfortable. "Sam, I got no choice here. The warrant's legal." Through the window, Samuel caught a glimpse of Elena's face, pale with terror, one hand protective over her swollen belly. Jesse stood beside her, small fists clenched, ready to fight the world. "She's too close to delivering to travel," Samuel said. "The stress could kill her and the baby." "Then we'll wait," Blackwood smiled. "My men are already surrounding your property. You've got 2 choices, Garrett. Hand her over now or watch us take her by force. Either way, she's coming with us." Samuel's finger found the trigger of his rifle. 3 against 1 weren't good odds, especially with Elena and Jesse to protect. But letting them take her was surrender to a different kind of death. Slow, legal, and just as final. "There's a 3rd choice," Samuel said quietly. "And what's that?" Before Samuel could answer, Elena's scream cut through the morning air. High, sharp, primal, the sound of a woman in labor. "The baby!" Jesse's voice called from inside. "Pa, the baby's coming." Blackwood's face went dark with satisfaction. "Seems like nature's made the choice for us. Carter, get inside and secure the woman. I want that child born safe." But Samuel was already moving, backing toward the door, rifle trained on the 3 men. "You want her, you'll have to go through me first." And in that moment, with Elena's cries echoing behind him and his son's frightened breathing at his back, Samuel Garrett finally understood what Mary had tried to tell him before she died. Sometimes love means standing between the innocent and the world's appetite for cruelty. Even when the odds are impossible, even when standing means dying. Inside, Elena gripped the bedsheets with white-knuckled desperation, her face slick with sweat and tears. Jesse knelt beside her, holding her hand with the solemnity of a child who'd learned too young that courage sometimes meant staying calm when everything fell apart. "How long between the pains?" Samuel asked, barricading the door with Mary's heavy dresser. "Close," Elena gasped. "Too close. The baby—" Another contraction seized her, and she arched against the pillow. Outside, Blackwood's voice carried through the walls. "Garrett, you're only making this harder on everyone. That child is my grandchild, my blood. I have rights." "Your son was a rapist and a murderer," Samuel called back. "The only right you have is to hell." Elena's eyes found his across the small room. If something happens to me, promise you'll protect the baby. Promise you won't let him. Nothing's going to happen to you." Samuel moved to her side, his rough rancher's hands surprisingly gentle as he checked her condition. "But that baby's coming fast. Jesse, get the clean sheets from the chest and the whiskey from the kitchen. For her, for me." Despite her pain, Elena almost smiled. Jesse scrambled to obey, his movements quick and sure. Samuel watched his son, this boy who had barely spoken for months after his mother's death, transformed into someone steady and capable by the simple need to help. "Tell me about your mother," Samuel said, trying to distract Elena as another contraction built. "She was Apache, Black Canyon people." Elena's breathing came in short bursts. "She taught me about healing, about being strong. She said—" Elena cried out as the pain peaked, then continued. "She said a child born in struggle would be a warrior." Through the window, Samuel could see Blackwood's men taking positions. Professional, patient. They'd done this before. "My mother died having me," Jesse said quietly, returning with the supplies. "But Pa says she was the strongest person he ever knew." Elena reached for the boy's hand again, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Then you carry her strength, just like this baby will carry mine." The next contraction came stronger, longer. Elena bit down on a piece of leather to keep from screaming, her whole body rigid with effort. Samuel found himself remembering Mary's labor, the hours of waiting, the blood, the desperate prayers that went unanswered. But this was different. Elena was different. Despite her youth, despite her terror, she fought with a fierce determination that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with this harsh country in the first place. It broke the weak, but it forged the strong into something unbreakable. "I can see the head," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Just a little more, Elena. Just a little more." Outside, the shadows were shifting. Blackwood was getting impatient. Inside, life was fighting to enter a world that had already marked it for suffering. And in between, three people who'd been strangers a week ago had become something more fragile and more powerful than family. They'd become home. The baby's cry split the air like a battle hymn, strong, defiant, alive. "A girl," Samuel announced, his voice thick with wonder as he wrapped the tiny red-faced child in clean cloth. "A beautiful, perfect girl." Elena sobbed with relief and exhaustion, reaching up with trembling arms to hold her daughter. The baby was small but healthy, with her mother's dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of inherited strength. "Maria," Elena whispered, touching the baby's face with fingertips that shook with reverence. "Her name is Maria Elena." Jesse leaned close, his own eyes wide with amazement. "She's so little. Will she be okay?" "She'll be more than okay," Samuel said. "She'll be extraordinary." Outside, Blackwood's patience finally shattered. "Enough! Carter, kick in that door. I want my grandchild, and I want that murdering whore in chains." But as the men approached the house, Samuel did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch, still holding little Maria in his arms. "Sheriff Morrison," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard with absolute calm. "Before you execute that warrant, I think there's something you should know. Sam, don't make this harder. Elena Vasquez is now Elena Garrett. We were married this morning by the power vested in me as a territorial magistrate." Samuel's lie came smooth as silk. "This child was born in wedlock, on my land, to my lawful wife. And if Mr. Blackwood thinks he can prove otherwise, he's welcome to try." Blackwood's face turned purple. "That's impossible. You can't just what? Marry a woman I love, protect my family." Samuel's voice hardened. "The same law that gives you the right to hunt her gives me the right to defend her. And Sheriff, I'm curious, how exactly does Mr. Blackwood know this child belongs to his dead son? Was he there when the crime was committed?" The implication hung heavy in the desert air. Carter shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, his hand moving away from his gun. "You're harboring a fugitive," Blackwood snarled. "I'm protecting my wife and daughter." Samuel held up the baby so all could see her perfect, innocent face. "And any man who wants to hurt them will have to explain to God why he thought murdering a newborn was worth his immortal soul." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind across the prairie and Maria's soft breathing. Then Sheriff Morrison slowly removed his hat. "Mr. Blackwood, I think there's been some confusion here. If the woman is legally married and the child born in wedlock, well, that changes the nature of your claim considerably." "This is preposterous. I won't stand for—" "You'll stand for whatever the law allows," Morrison cut him off. And right now, the law says Sam Garrett has every right to defend his family on his own property. Blackwood looked from face to face, seeing his certainty crumble. Finally, with a curse that would have made the devil blush, he wheeled his horse around and spurred toward town, his men following. 3 months later, Elena and Samuel stood before the circuit preacher and made their marriage real in the eyes of both God and territory law. Jesse, now 11 and grown tall with purpose, held baby Maria during the ceremony, whispering promises about all the things he'd teach her when she got older. 5 years after that, when Maria Elena Garrett took her first steps across the same porch where her mother had once faced death, Elena would tell her daughter about the day she learned that family wasn't about blood or law or the color of your skin. It was about the moment when someone looked at you, broken, desperate, afraid, and chose to stand between you and the world's cruelty. The desert wind still blew across their ranch, carrying stories of struggle and survival, but now it also carried laughter, the sound of a child who would grow up knowing that love was stronger than hate, that courage was ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and that sometimes the greatest victories came not from fighting the darkness, but from choosing to kindle light. And in the evenings, when the sun painted the sky red and gold, Samuel Wu, LD, sit on his porch and watch his family, his real family, chosen and fought for and blessed by grace, and know that some promises were worth keeping, even when they cost everything you thought you had to lose. Stories like this aren't just told, they're felt. If you felt it too, subscribe and stay with us.